can probably guess my speech is on Tourette's, but it's specifically on like discrimination against disabilities like in our generation, because people don't think about the fact that there's actually discrimination like a lot in schools, even nowadays. What word comes to mind when you think of discrimination?
Race.
You can put your hands up.
Religion.
Gender. This is the actual definition. You probably didn't think about disability because it's not the first thing that comes to mind, but it's actually, according to like race, age, gender, it can be anything that like differentiates a person and puts them in a minority. What's the first word that comes to your mind when you think of Tourette's?
When you say beans.
Uncontrollable.
Yeah. You probably thought of swearing, funny comments, or probably due to me, TikTok challenges. But these are actually a lot of misconceptions. Like a lot of people think that Tourette's is just the funny like noises and the words because that's what's portrayed in the media, but it's actually a lot more of a physical condition than it is actually vocal, but people don't know that. So these are a few facts about the actual like medical stuff behind it. So Tourette's is neurological, which means it's caused by the brain. It's actually the signals that the nervous system sends, and they just misfire. So like if you want to pick up an object and like move it, your brain sends a signal to your hand to move it. But in someone with Tourette's, the brain sends those signals when they shouldn't, and it just misfires at random times, which creates the noises and the movements. Only 10% of people actually have coprolalia, which is the swearing and the inappropriate things that you most commonly think about when you think of Tourette's. They're completely uncontrollable, and we don't think about what we say. Like, if we say something, it's most commonly the thing that we shouldn't say in that situation. This is important because jokes go unnoticed, and even though it's okay to laugh at tics when they're funny, a lot of jokes are actually really offensive, like passing comments that people don't realise. A lot of discrimination against disabilities and Tourette's in schools goes really unnoticed because people don't realise that it's actually offensive. You've probably heard people say things like these. I mean, there's another one as well. These are examples that I've heard like in classrooms in this school. And it's even in the media, like when Boris Johnson did a speech a couple months ago, he was rambling on and saying random words, and I think he swore in a couple, and it was trending on Twitter that he had Tourette's just because he was saying weird things, and they used Tourette's as a way to kind of joke about it and explain it, which really hurts the reputation for people like me, because then people just think it's about swearing, which it isn't. You wouldn't say jokes like that, you wouldn't make things trend like imitating that disorder if it was a disability like being blind, so why do it about Tourette's? The reality is that Tourette's isn't a joke, even though the tics are funny, and when I say beans in class, it's pretty amusing. We actually can't do a lot of things we used to, like I can't go to the cinema, libraries, I can't drive. There's a lot of things that people don't really take into account that it actually restricts. Even going to like the shops and stuff, I get judged by every single person like I walk past for something that I can't control. We're associated with a lot of negative attention. Like, we don't think about going to the shop as like a hard thing or walking anywhere, but there's so much negative attention around swearing and stuff that when I do that involuntarily, people still see it as a negative thing and they just think I'm misbehaving. Because Tourette's directly goes against the standards and expectations from society. Because when we're little, we're brought up, like we're taught to not swear and not behave and look stupid because it's embarrassing in public, but Tourette's makes you do those exact things that you're not supposed to do, but involuntarily. That's just a few things that you might not think about are actually really difficult to do with Tourette's. A couple of them you might know, like police and security, obviously shouting about bombs and things that aren't really appropriate in those situations. What can you do to actually help people with Tourette's in this situation? Understand that my tics annoy me a lot more than they annoy anyone here, even though I know the noises are pretty annoying when they're just consistent in the background, but when you can actually feel them as like a physical feeling, it's a lot more annoying than just hearing something in the background. You only have to deal with the tics for a short amount of time. Like if you have 1 hour with me a day, like one lesson, it's not a lot of time to put up with it. When I have to deal with it 24/7, like if I want to sit at home and go to sleep, they don't just go away, they don't give you a break. So be respectful that it's exhausting, and jokes aren't always appropriate because I might just be exhausted and I've probably heard the joke about 15 times that day already. Think before you speak, think before you make a joke, and think before you and your friends use my condition for your own entertainment. Think, this is my reality, this is Tourette's. Any questions?
Questions?
You can ask anything, I've probably heard it before. Emily?
What do you think like the government or the media could do to like change the misrepresentation?
I think it's really important not to like put in TV shows and stuff just about the swearing, because a lot of things, it's like you think of Tourette's in things like Family Guy, it's been shown as just like a stupid noise or like a really funny thing, when there's a lot more to it than just being entertaining. Megan?
Have you been like suffering from Tourette's since you were born, or did it develop gradually?
Well, you're born with, thank you. You're born with the DNA to have Tourette's because it's genetic. So technically, you'll have it from birth, like in your DNA, but it might not represent itself until like a later age. So my tics started when I was 7, but they were really mild. So I didn't get a diagnosis until 14, year 10, because we didn't know it was an issue at that point. So they just kind of gradually built up to what they are now.
Why do you think there's a lack of role models in this field, and what can we do about that?
I think a lot of people are embarrassed to have Tourette's because it's not really talked about up until recently, up until like people on TikTok and stuff, because there's so much negative attention around it that people don't want to speak out, because there's like people are horrible online and stuff, so a lot of people get bullied for it, and so it's easy just to try and hide it. But I think it's important that we destigmatize the whole thing, because it's not something we can control, and so we need more people to speak out and just normalize it, even though it's not something to normalize with normal people. Like normal people can't really swear in the streets, but if you hear someone, just kind of assume that they probably can't control it if they're saying stuff like that in the street, because it's hard for us and it's embarrassing, so it's easier if people just try and be open-minded and accept it.
You kind of are talking about neurological things that are quite scientific. How would you explain it? Because you don't want to, part of destigmatising is getting children used to it, isn't it? How would you explain it to a child so that they could kind of understand?
It's really difficult because I have a 5-year-old sister who obviously hears all my tics, and there's no way for them to like process the brain and signals and stuff, but I just kind of say that I can't control it, and I think it's important to teach that they shouldn't copy the behaviour, because obviously it can be quite catchy, and she repeats quite a few of my tics, which is obviously an issue. But it's important that kids are kind of exposed to it, because they're going to see stuff like that in life, and obviously if I want to go to like playgrounds or like places with children, which is pretty much anywhere, then they have to kind of get used to it. But I think it's actually adults that are a lot more like against it. It tends to be the older generations that are less accepting, because kids just kind of get used to it, accept that it's something different. But yeah.